Good morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath to each and every one of you. Last week, I did something I didn't do. I don't even remember the last time I did it. I didn't come to church. I was so sick. It's better for you that I didn't come to church. There is this really nasty flu that is going around. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you are here this morning with it. We're glad that you're here. But I was at home. I'm on penicillin now. The doctor saw me. I swelled up, and it was just not a very fun experience. But I'm better now, so we can shake hands after church. During this past week, I met with someone who shared with me their testimony. It was a wonderful testimony. I thought, I would love to share this testimony with my church family. So that I asked them, I said, is it okay if I share this testimony with the church? Yes, they said, no problem, you can share it with the church. So before we begin, I wanted to share you this testimony by this person in the form of video.
One day I hurt my arm and I asked Mom to pray to Jesus, and Jesus made it feel much better. I prayed to Jesus and Jesus listened to my prayer and put babies in my mama's tummy. I need some strong arms to give it my baby sister, because I'm going to be a big sister. And I'm really excited, and I wanted to share with you. Now can I have ice cream?
Round two, here we go. Yeah, thank you. It was getting harder and harder to cover the tummy that was starting to grow, so we just decided to announce it, let you know. We do ask for your prayers, that we have a healthy baby, healthy delivery, healthy mommy. We don't know what the gender is. She thinks it's going to be a little girl, but we won't know for a little while still. Thank you. Please keep us in your prayers. If we could switch back over to the slide. Oh, it is on the slides. My bad. Okay, so the title of the sermon this morning is Spot the Difference. When I was a kid, I used to love playing this game. I was good at it. I'm a visual person. I'm a visual learner. And so when you put two pictures in front of me and you say, spot the difference, I can spot the difference really quick. Are you good at those spot the difference? No, some of you are good, some of you are not. Well, we're going to test it this morning. I have a few pictures we're going to go through. The first one is for kids. The first one is for young children, little kids. I want to see if you can spot the difference on the first one. The second one is for our youth and young adults. Our third one is for our adults and seniors. I'll tell you why in just a second. And the fourth one is for everybody. All right, ready? Here is the one for our kids, children. There's actually four things different between the two pictures, but can one of the kids spot one of the differences? The nose, you're right. One of the noses is pink and one of them is, well, they're both pink. One gray? The nose. Okay, the ear, yes, actually, the ear is missing on this one. Any other ones? Yes, there's two hearts, right? One over here and one on the bottom. Excellent. Good job. Next one is for our Pathfinders. Our young adults, our youth, because it is your induction day today, I want to see if I can stump you with this one. First, Pathfinder, see it. Tell us what the difference is. Nope. Oh, I hear some people catching on. What is it? Joel, you have it? Yes, you're right. All right, we have a difference right here. I just copied and pasted this letter and put it there. It's not Pathfinders, it's Pathfinders. That's that one. Okay, next one is for our adults, but especially seniors. And you'll understand why in just a second. This one's hard. I'm really trying to stump you on this one, okay? Tell me if you can spot the difference. I know it's difficult, especially for those of you sitting more closer in the back. But there is a difference. It's small, but it is so important. This is a picture of just a web page, just the Bank of America web page. One of them is official, and the other one is not. Can you tell the difference? Yes? Where is it? What? Yes, okay, we have both answers. I heard both, you're both correct. Right here, there's a little lock symbol on the official website. And there's also, beside HTTP, there's an S for secured. Make sure when you get those emails, these are specifically targeted to elderly folk, with emails saying you have to log in quick, you have to renew, you have to do something because it's about to expire, blah, blah, blah. You go to a fake website, it looks exactly the same. You log in, you put all your information in, and they have now all the information they need to clean out your bank account. Okay? Last one. Good job. Let's see if I can really stump you on this one. Last one is for everybody. Okay? Spot the difference. Obviously, they're different. One is a Hispanic male, and the other one is an Asian woman. Now, suppose I told you that one of these two here is a Christian, and the other one is not. How easy is it, or how hard is it, to tell if someone is a Christian or not? How easy is it to walk down the street, to walk into your place of work, to your classroom at your school? Is it easy to say, yes, that person's a Christian, no, that person's not, that person's a Christian? How easy is it? Should it be easy? Well, according to Jesus Christ, we have his very words in our scripture reading. There is one key way you can tell between a Christian or what a true Christian looks like. And he says this, John 13:35, I'll remind you again, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you what? Love one another. When Jesus said these words, he was in an upper room. The only light that was coming or into the room, or the source of light, was just a few candles. It was dark. By this time, Judas had left the table and he was running down the cobblestone streets as fast as his sandals could carry him to betray his Savior. It was the cool of night, and Jesus knew that in just a few short hours from then, there was going to be a trial, and by noon the next day, he would be hanging on a cross. And so he's taking this time now with his disciples, his closest friends in the upper room, and thinking, this is important. This is like, I want to get my message across to these friends of mine. What is something that I can share with them? He shares a couple of things, but this is something that I thought was very interesting. The most important things he saved for last. And notice how, although he could have said it many different ways, he didn't. He said it this way. He could have said, people will know you by the food you eat or don't eat, or the music you listen to, or the clothes that you wear, or your stance on women's ordination. He didn't say those things. He could have. But he said the most important thing. He wanted to get the message across above all other things. The other things are important, yes, but the most important way, the most important thing for us to do as Christians is to love one another. What does that look like? To find out, I want to rewind the clock back from this moment just a couple of years to a time when Jesus is starting to gain popularity. He's starting to walk around. He's starting to get a following. People are following. Who is this man who speaks with this authority against the high priest in the synagogue? Who is this guy who walks on water? The blind can see. The lame can walk. People are coming from all over to see this man named Jesus. And one of the best stories Jesus uses to illustrate what that looks like right there is a story that he shares on the road to Jerusalem one day as his popularity is beginning to grow. He's walking towards Jerusalem and he meets a very important man. The Bible calls him a scribe in one version. Another version, it calls him a lawyer. Another version, a teacher of the law. And the version that we're going to use this morning, which is the New International Version, it calls him an expert in the law. These are just basically different ways to tell us what he did for a living. But first, let's go to the text. If you want, you can open your Bibles or electronic devices to Luke chapter 10, verse 25. I do have the verses today up on the screen, if you would rather just follow along. It says in Luke 10:25, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" So let's deal with the first part. What is an expert of the law? These people, these men, were very well-connected people. They were very influential. They had allies in the priesthood, at the temple. They were very well-connected. These guys used to grow up and would go to the Ivy League of schools, to the Harvards, to the Yales, and they would study the whole entire Old Testament, but specifically the first 5 books, which is the Torah, the first 5 books of the laws of Moses. That's all they did, would study the laws, and more laws. These people were the ones in society, whenever you had a judicial meeting, they would be the ones to correct us simple folk to the correct interpretation of the law. They would be the ones in the back saying, excuse me, no, you shouldn't read that way. It actually means this. Or it should be read this way. Very intelligent people. They knew their stuff. And so the question he asks Jesus, you could almost call it a loaded question. You ever been asked a loaded question before? Question you know that they know that you know that there's only one answer to this question, or they present it to you in such a way that there's really 2 possibilities, but either way you answer, you're going to get yourself in trouble. He knows this is a loaded question, and Jesus does too. And Jesus does something that's so great. The best way to diffuse one of those sticky situations with a loaded question. What's the best way to do it? Jesus did it all the time because the Pharisees were constantly trying to get him, to trap him, to get him into something. You simply ask another question. Listen to what Jesus responds to this very loaded question in front of people now. "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" Of course, he was waiting for that question. Of course, he was prepared for this. Verse 27, he answers, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." It's almost as if this scribe, this lawyer, this professional had this whole thing orchestrated from the beginning. It's like he knew, he had a play sheet. Okay, he's probably going to ask me that question. I'm going to answer with this. He wanted to look good in front of others at the expense of Jesus Christ. And he does something that Jesus does many times too. He quotes the Old Testament thinking that if I quote something, I'm going to look like I know what I'm doing, especially off by heart. But then, verse 28, Jesus begins to flip the script a little bit on this lawyer of ours. Look at what Jesus says in response to his answer. "You have answered correctly." He's saying, yeah, I know. But then he says, "Do this and you will live." Do this and you will live. You see, the problem that our expert was having was not information. He knew a lot of things. Legal things, whenever it came to the law, whenever it came to the Old Testament, he was it. He knew everything. The problem wasn't information. The problem was application. He knew a whole lot about the law, but all of that was just head knowledge. All of it was academic. He never applied it to his life, and Jesus saw right through that. I found a very interesting quote by an English philosopher. His name is Francis Bacon. He says this: "It is not what men eat." Men, women is just a general term for it. Doesn't matter what people eat, but what they digest that makes them strong. It's not what we gain, but what we save that makes us rich. Not what we read, but what we remember that makes us learned or educated. Not what we preach, but what we practice that makes us Christians. Sadly, even as Christians, we really have a temptation to fall into this trap of knowing a lot of things, of knowing the 28 fundamentals, of knowing the Daniel and Revelation seminars, of knowing diet, of knowing this, of knowing that. And we have a temptation for knowing so much that we forget about Jesus Christ. It's a temptation that we can face. And Paul, in the book of Corinthians, he's writing to a church that is dealing with this very problem. They know a lot of stuff, but they're missing the point. And so they're arguing over whether or not they should eat that meat that was offered to idols. And listen to what Paul says. He says, now regarding the question about food that has been offered to idols, he says, yes, we know that we all have knowledge about this issue. But while knowledge makes us feel important, it is what? Love that strengthens the church. This is not to say that knowledge is bad. What it is saying is that you can have all the knowledge in the world. If you don't apply it, it's useless. Not wanting to admit defeat, not wanting to give Jesus the higher ground here, this lawyer is starting to look for a loophole, starting to look for any angle that he could take on Jesus to kind of, to gain the upper ground again, to make Jesus look like he has to answer to him. And he thinks he found one. Verse 29, he asks Jesus a further question. He says, but he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? Okay, Jesus, I'm in charge of this conversation now. Who is my neighbor? And Jesus does not reply with an answer. He doesn't, a quick definition. He doesn't even reply with a question. He shares a short story. It's only a few verses long. We're going to read it this morning. This is what Jesus responds. He says, in reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite. When he came to the place, he saw him and passed by on the other side. The journey from Jerusalem to Jericho is very well known for its danger. I've actually had the opportunity to go right on that road. And the folks over there have a nickname for that road. They call it over there the Red Way. Now I'm going to let your imagination fill in the blanks, but you can imagine why they call that road the Red Way. The story here that Jesus is telling his listeners is something that they know happens very often. Mothers and children would say bye to their fathers, not knowing if they're going to come back on their way to Jericho and back on business. This is a very dangerous road. And what's interesting is that I'm sure it talks about a priest and a Levite. This really humbled me when I started to look into this and started to make some connections. The priest and the Levite, you know who they would be of today's world? The pastor, yeah, me. Somebody said you, me, that's right. The pastor and the conference director walked right by. This is absolutely scandalous for a Jew. You're saying that the conference and the pastor walked by? Doesn't he tell us every week to go help the poor, and he just walks right by this guy? The tragedy of this story is that both of them looked at this guy on the side of the road and said, this person, this situation is an inconvenience for me. Surely another member in the church will walk by, will see that man. Hopefully they remember the things that I've been teaching them. Hopefully they have more time than I do to deal with this situation. And so they keep on walking. Jesus continues to finish off this story. That's it. He says, but a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was. And when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after them, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you. There are 3 kind of short, concise, simple messages that I want to leave with you from this story. And the first is this: love feels something. Love feels something. The Bible says the Samaritan had compassion. Other versions it says, some say pity, some say his heart went out to him. And like I said before, this is a very scandalous story that Jesus is telling these folks, because they're thinking, well, okay, if it's not the religious leaders, at least it could be a Jew that helps him. Why does Jesus have to bring in a Samaritan? The Jews and the Samaritans absolutely hated each other with a passion. There's no such thing, we know this story as the Good Samaritan. There's no such thing as a Good Samaritan in the mind of a Jew. It's like me telling you this morning, an honest thief or a faithful adulterer. Make sense? Not really. And to the Jewish mind, a Good Samaritan doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But love feels something. And this is what Jesus was trying to teach them. Love feels something. Even if it's for your enemy, love feels something. Number 2, love does something. Did you notice in one verse, one single verse, verse 34, there are 6 action words. 6 actions happen. This story is about action. This is all about, listen to the thing. It says in verse 34, he went to him. He bandaged his wounds. He poured oil on his wounds. He put him on his donkey. He brought him to an inn, and he took care of him. 6 times, 6 verbs in one verse. There's a famous saying, I never did find out who said this, but this is very interesting. It says, people may not always tell you how they feel about you, but they will always show you. Pay attention. Isn't that true? You don't have to have people tell you what they think of you. Watch how they treat you, and it will tell you a whole lot. Love is not something that you can just say without backing it up. And wives and husbands, girlfriend and boyfriends, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Being a follower of Jesus Christ means that you love other people. And when you love other people, you do something about it. Because love feels something, but it also does something. Last of all, number 3, love will cost something. Love always costs something. The Samaritan put his man on his own donkey, which means, if you think about it, the Samaritan now had to walk. You ever think about that? He is personally inconvenienced. And then he goes to the innkeeper, he says, listen, I'll pick up the tab. He is not only personally inconvenienced, now he's financially inconvenienced. There is nothing more that this Samaritan could have done to show this man compassion. There are times in our Christian walk where Christianity will cost you something. Sometimes it's a friendship that you've had for a long time. Sometimes it's friends at school. Sometimes it's a job. Christianity, you just look through the pages of history and you will see hundreds of thousands of people who gave everything because they were a Christian, even their own lives. Love, Christianity will cost you something. Something I think we should ask ourselves, and why not this morning, as while we're on the topic, is what has Christianity cost me? Has Christianity cost me anything? At the conclusion of his story, Jesus asks the expert one more question. He says, which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robber? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, Go and do likewise. Isn't that interesting? This man can't even, because of the hate in his heart, he can't even say it was the Samaritan. He says, oh, it was the one who had mercy on him. He can't even bring himself to say Samaritan because he hates Samaritans so much. And for the second time, Jesus is telling him to do something. All about action. Do something about what you know. Notice, too, how at the beginning the question was, who is my neighbor? And Jesus now flipped it on this lawyer. And now the question is, what kind of a neighbor are you? What kind of a neighbor am I? What kind of a neighbor are we? In closing, I want to share with you a story that I heard a while ago. A story about a theology professor at a seminary university in England. He was a very good professor. He taught everything from the law to practical Christianity. His classes were very different than most professors because while most professors had midterms and projects and papers due, he only had one thing, and that was a final exam on the last day of the semester. This class was a core requirement for those who wanted to graduate. So these students had no choice. They had to take his class. They had to pass his class in order to graduate. As the time got near to the day when they would write their final exam, the professor reminded them over and over the time and the place of the exam. He would take his time to write it on the board over and over. Remember the time and the place. He mentioned to them that if you are 1 minute late, I am locking the door. You have to be here on time if you want to write the exam. And he never told them what was going to be on the exam, but he did tell them, listen, I know you learned a lot this semester, but try to, out of everything that I taught you, try to distill it and try to apply it to your life somehow. Apply it to everyday life. Well, the day of the exam came, and the students, of course, what happens most of the times when students have exam, they like to congregate in an area, and they like to quiz each other, and kind of the last final push after the all-nighter to see how much you can remember. And they were sitting in the lobby of the building that this exam was going to be in. The exam was going to be up on the 4th floor. And so they were sitting there on the bottom, constantly checking the time, making sure that they were going to be up at that class when that exam time would happen before the door locks. 10 minutes left, they said, okay, everybody, let's go upstairs, let's go to the room, we got to make sure that we're early, we want to get in. As these students are walking up the stairs, they arrive at the door of the classroom where this exam was going to take place. And they see a note on the door, kind of getting suspicious. It's dark in the classroom, door's closed, there's a note on the door. The note read, the exam has been moved to another class. And it says what the class was, and they look at the class and they look at each other, you have to be kidding me. This class is on the other end of campus. We have 6 minutes to run across campus. These campuses are big, so they run as fast as they can, down the stairs, out the door, across campus. A group of students just booking it as fast as they could. They run into the building where the exam was going to take place. They run upstairs to the room. They burst through the door, and there's the teacher sitting there with his arms crossed, just waiting for each one of them to kind of barge in and fall over and just out of breath. And he waits until the last person walks through that door, asks them to close the door, and then he looks at his students and says, welcome. I have good news and I have bad news. What do you want to hear first? They said, let's hear the good news, okay? We ran all this way. Let's hear something good. And he says, well, the good news is that you all just finished your exam. Excuse me? We haven't even started writing yet. What do you mean we finished the exam? What was the exam? He said, here's the bad news. I should fail all of you. You could see the expression on each of those students' faces, just trying to make sense of what just happened. And as the teacher began to explain to them what just happened. He said, all semester I've been teaching you about Jesus. All semester I've been teaching about love. How love is an action word. I knew that you would be studying very hard everything that I taught you, but I wanted to see if it made a difference in your life or not. You were all so focused on writing this test, showing me how many things you remembered, all the Bible verses, all the theological terms, everything like that. And you failed to see the young girl on the corner with her books on the floor. You ran right past a young boy with a flat tire, and all he needed was somebody to hold the bike still while he changed out his tire. You failed to see, you ran right past an elderly professor coming up these stairs who needed help going up the stairs with books in his arms, a cane in his hand, barely holding on to the cane and the railing at the same time going up the stairs. Didn't even hold the door open for him. I hope you never forget the lesson that you learned today. I bet they never did. The most important lesson he told those students that day is it doesn't matter how much you know. It's what you do that counts. It doesn't matter how many things we know. What are you doing with the knowledge that you have of Jesus Christ? As Christians, sometimes we like to think that we know a lot about God. Come to church every week, we learn, we study the Sabbath school, sometimes we grow up in the church. But when was the last time you did something about it? Love feels, love does, and love costs. And as I look at those three right there, I am reminded of a very simple fact. And that is a verse that we all know very well. For God so loved the world. God felt something for you and for me. He felt love for you and for me. And because he loved us, because he felt that love, he did something about it. He could have just left us alone. What did he do? He sent his only son. Did this love that he has for you and me cost God anything? Did it cost his son anything? It cost them everything. Jesus gave his life because he loved you, and that is proof that he loves you. So how do you spot a Christian? It's hard to do just by looking at a picture, walking through Yorkdale or through work, looking at people, at their faces. But watch what they do. Watch how they treat others. It's their love that gives them away. God bless.